Hi, everybody. It's nice to have a hand, isn't it? It's nice to have a lot of things. Actually, I was talking to somebody. This is his first online session with us. He's done a lot with PZI, and he said, it's better than I expected for an online sort of thing. And I said, yeah, you can really do begin to feel that your house is on retreat, and your chair is on retreat, and your animals are on retreat. And he said, no, it's even more than that. People on the streets are on retreat, and trees outside are on retreat. Pretty soon, everything is on retreat. And it's part of that welcome thing, I guess. The world just starts to feel more welcoming. Somehow I start to feel more welcoming of it. And this morning I want to pick up a thread that John kind of started yesterday around, he said, with the miscellaneous koans, this is true of all koans, but it seems to be particularly, evident or repeated or powerful in the miscellaneous, that it's always in your own life, in your own circumstances. They're not really koans for theory. And the word that kept coming to my mind was really, it's kind of a plunge thing. Like you have to take the plunge in order to enter the miscellaneous. And as a woman in one of my groups, it started doing cold plunging. And I asked, because this is my way, well, you get hot first, right? You have like a sauna or a hot tub. And she said, no, I just cold plunge. She said, my swimming pool won't work for anything else right now. So I've decided to make use of it and just cold plunge. And there's always that moment where you just think, I'm not going to be able to do it. Whatever it is, I'm not going to be able to do it. But if you get past that, something different happens. And so much of the miscellaneous as well is looking at how do we keep ourselves separate from things. The other side of that, I remember when I first took them up, John said, well, basically they're about empathy. But it's the kind of empathy where you're down in with everything. It's not sort of looking across and thinking, oh, that's rough, or that's fun, or you're in it. And someone was telling me this week that one of the most strange experiences he had of this is when he was attending a retreat and he went to see a teacher. And there was a screen door. It was a mountain retreat, and there was a screen door. And when he went in, the teacher said, oh, you can leave the door open. And this was incredibly disturbing to him because he thought that there are bugs and there are germs, and what if things might come in? And he's a physician, and so he's well versed in, he said, don't you know that at any moment you have all these germs and bacteria and cancer that are just waiting to take you over? And he said, you just leave the door open. And it's like that there's a kind of getting in touch with what our barriers are out here and in here. And one of the things that comes up in that is you get to see all the things you kind of throw up as a way of not taking the plunge. And there are plenty. Yesterday I was talking to someone who was absolutely enchanted with the little leaf type thing. that Jan Black sent in your packet that's sort of transparent and uh, absolutely enchanted that it changes with the light and that it does something different when it's in a different light. And, meanwhile, this person was saying, well, yeah, but we've never really been able to like stay with a koan. And why do you think that is? And do you think that there are people who can do koans and people who can't? And I said, leave. And she said, well, but yeah, but that's not a that has nothing to do with koans. Like that, why do you think and I said, it's happening right now. This is the mind wants to stand outside in some way and have a theory or something to think about or a objection or even a desire. But you just see that actually will not help you be with this leaf right now, will not help you with how the light changes. It will, you just have to surrender and enter. And even this whole question of where do you go when you die? I found this, I came across this interesting quote from Carl Jung recently that said that, he's a phenomenologist. He's looking at just what happens. He said, I can't really believe in anything, but something we know that happens. If you look at people's dreams, that the psyche somehow behaves as if life continues. And, that the dreams that appear close to death sometimes are astonishingly optimistic about, like, you're going on a trip, or you're reuniting with someone, or you're suddenly healed, and then the next day the person dies. And so there's this great sense of mystery that really the only step I can take is to enter the phenomena of whatever is appearing. Theory doesn't really help. And had such a funny image of this last night as John was giving his goose in the bottle talk. I was, you remember the Dr. Seuss book, Green Eggs and Ham? And, the whole entire book really is this guy being really sure that he does not like green eggs and ham, Sam I am. And, would you eat them with a goat? Would you eat them in a boat? Would you eat them, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. And finally, in the end, he breaks down and he tastes them. And in fact, they're delicious. He loves green eggs and ham. He built this entire self, this entire construction around not liking green eggs and ham. And in fact, I was thinking, well, miscellaneous koans are sort of like that, Would you eat them with a bell? Would you eat them with demons out of hell? Would you eat them with a rock? Would you eat them in a sock? Would you, But if you won't taste, if you won't enter, you actually, don't know what might happen. And so I want to tell some stories about that this morning. Mostly I want to talk about the other side of that, which is, why do we somehow get so invested in not liking green eggs and ham? Like, my mother told me they were not good, or I'll be embarrassed if I get caught eating them, or I've always said I didn't like them and so I better not, or whatever it is. And I want to talk about the insidiousness. The self is so sneaky. These sort of ways in which we're certain about ourselves or the world that starts to somehow draw a barrier. And someone said this great thing to me recently. She's been sort of realizing that, I don't know, why am I so invested in this thing? And she finally just said, well, I've been doing it for so long. How would why would I, it feels really sad to give it up now, this whole story, and whether I've succeeded or failed, and, the whole project, I feel quite invested. but it then comes to define and constrain everything. It starts to color what you think people are, what you think the world is, what you think is possible or not possible. And so these are just things that have happened in my life recently, and enough of them started to appear. I thought, oh, this must be what I want to talk about. And the first is that it's an incident with glasses. A couple of these incidents seem incredibly benign, but they just show you exactly what happens when the self just starts to kind of inch its way into things. And the first one is we have a friend who makes glasses. And she's very good at making glasses, and she prides herself very much on knowing exactly the kind of glasses shape for your face and what color and what would look good. And she's good at this. There's proof that self likes proof. There's proof that she does a good job at this, and people are grateful and been doing it a long time. And she's very grateful to my partner for some various things. And so she decided she wanted to help my partner get some glasses, and which sounded great. And so we went into her shop, and she had some in mind, and she tried some on, and they were nice, but they were a little big. And the friend said, all right, well, I'll order a different pair, a different size that will be just right, I'm sure. And my partner said, well, I like them in this, color. Okay, yeah. I'm sure that you'll love these ones that will arrive, but I'll get them so you can try them on. So time goes by and nobody hears anything. And my partner really needs some glasses. And so she says, well, hey, any chance of trying on those glasses soon? I tried on some other ones that I also really like and would love to take a look if you have them, but no pressure. Oh, yeah. They should be in very soon. And okay. Cool, great. And time goes on. No communication. And really need glasses. And so now it has become, oh, well, I don't want to be rude and go somewhere else because, my friend wants to make them for me and we're invested now. And so finally, she sends a text that says, any chance, the glasses will be ready for me to look at anytime soon. Oh, yes, they're ready. I'll bring them on when I see you. Didn't bring them. No glasses. This is starting. Now it's starting to get like, well, I don't know. Do we have to make a secret offering? Like, what's going on? But now it's getting kind of awkward. And finally, I sent your glasses in the mail. They should be to you in a couple days. Okay, well, cool. Well, the glasses that arrive are not the color and already have the prescription in them and are sort of meant to be this grand gesture of gift, which in theory would be great, except for they're not what was wanted and nothing was communicated, and they're with a tinged lens. They're more expensive, but unfortunately my partner's a painter, and so they make everything green. And so now things are incredibly awkward. And because the move that is expected in the field is, wow, thank you, amazing. That was so thoughtful of you. Except for what's true is we didn't ever talk about this. And so my partner sends a text and says, well, do these have a certain kind of lens in them? Because I noticed things are a little green. And the person says, well, can you see? And she says, well, yeah, I can see, but and so this goes on and on. And the point of my telling it to you is that in some way, generosity might be a true feeling, but when it starts to creep into, I know what's best, and I also want this person to be happy with me for doing something, and there's something that gets left out. It starts to be appropriated into a different territory that I'm going to call the territory of the self. And I always remember Alison Atwill uses a great word for this territory that the self often wants to extract. something from a situation. And it can even be, it gets very slippery because it can kind of be in the name of love or generosity or what seems to be love or generosity, but is actually kind of hoping that someone might say, wow, you're amazing, or that was so thoughtful, or like there's a contingency somehow in the field. And I came across this again recently in an even I don't know, this situation really interested me because it was more, so much of Zen is you can't make a declaration of something standing outside. You do have to be inside to actually experience what's true or what's appropriate or what's given by the circumstances at hand. And in this incidence, some of you know my father-in-law passed away recently. And one of the things that came to light as they were planning his funeral was that for many, many years, for 45 years, in fact, he wore a Jewish tie around his neck. And he was Jewish, but not particularly. And this was kind of interesting because his ex-wife, who was the mother of the children, had given it to him. But he never, ever, ever, ever took it off. And as with many people, certainly with him, the feelings around his passing were complicated because there was a lot of love for him, but particularly with his own kids, no one had felt close to him for a long time. And so there was this dual sense of sorrow and a kind of preciousness around the recent time before his passing, where there was more connection possible. But there was also this kind of unavoidable chasm of what, the last 30 or 40 years had been like. And you could tell everyone was trying to, I don't know, not really figure that out, but be with all of that. And when it came time to decide, well, what should go with him in his coffin when he goes into the ground, one of the siblings said, well, that tie, that necklace, seems like it should go. And everybody said, oh, yeah, definitely. Now, if he wore it 45 years and his skin cells were sort of embedded into it, it seems like that would be something to companion him wherever he's going when he dies. But as the intensity around the whole everything built and the grief got very complicated, one of the siblings texted the others and said, actually, I think I want it. I want the necklace. And how do you guys feel about that? I want to be able to have it and give it to my children. And this is where it gets interesting for me, because the other two siblings, and I felt this myself, even not really being involved, got an immediate no inside of them. That something about that didn't feel right. And the person who requested it was clearly not, it was tangly because, and this is where the territory of the self gets interesting. She wrote a long letter to the person that disagreed, saying how great it was that they were arguing about this and how great it was that they both, all these sort of reasons and justifications of why she wanted it. But reading the letter, you could tell something wasn't quite true. Something wasn't quite, it didn't feel like what was actually right in the situation. It didn't feel like what was actually true. And this sibling then went to the mother and got the mother involved. And the mother started making arguments like, well, but do the rest of you even believe in an afterlife? Do you think he's really going to need it? And taking it out into all these territories that didn't really have much to do, but, the self does this. It likes reasons and justifications and reasons for being a good person or a bad person, or who might deserve something and who might not. And in the case of this person, one could feel that there was something about wanting to prove that the last 3 months with her father had actually meant something, which is in one way, an incredibly understandable feeling. But you could feel this extra wanting, like, something for that, wanting to prove something with that. And that was part of the necklace. And watching everybody navigate this, I have no dog in this fight in a way. And so I'm just getting to feel all the different, like, what is this? And how nobody in the family wanted this one to feel bad. And so they were saying really half-hearted things like, well, no, it really doesn't matter. You should have it. But everyone knew that they didn't actually feel that way. They didn't believe it. And so when it came time, nobody went except for this person. And I happened to be the last person to see him before they closed it and the necklace was on him. You could just feel, like they could hold the possibility that maybe she needed this for her. And they were willing to love her for that, but they were also somehow not willing to agree when they didn't agree. And that allowed the situation to eventually reveal itself. And I guess that's part of taking the plunge, is that our reasons stop mattering, just start to feel what's here, what wants to happen. And also the things that we feel like we have to have or have to get rid of or have to solve or have to feel differently about just start to get a little more simple as we start to settle. We can't prove the theory of why the leaf is interesting, but it just speaks, starts to be closer to us and more intimate. And I guess part of what's interesting too is what makes that so hard. What makes it so hard to set down whatever I think I'm supposed to be or not be, or feel or not feel, or have or not have. And another story that happened recently, a young person in my life went on her first 10-day retreat. And not having done a retreat before at all, this was a significant step out into the vastness in a sense. And it was a Vipassana style retreat. And some instructions were given at the beginning about, these are somewhat reasonable instructions. I've had them before too, that, don't talk. We uphold that one sometimes, sometimes better than others. Don't make eye contact, don't. And when you're sitting, try to hold your posture. Don't get caught up in moving. And all these, in a way, are learning how to give the self a rest, right? That I don't need to be having opinions all the time, or reaching for connection all the time, or even with eye contact, that I can have a rest of doing whatever the usual thing I might do, which I realize then, I'm always thinking I need to be available or kind or hide, or, you just get kind of a break. The trouble was, this young person took these things so incredibly literally that she began to suffer a lot. She was not allowed to do these things, or that somehow she would fail the retreat and fail. And really, it was fail her idea of herself, because she went into the retreat thinking, I'm good at meditating and I'm good at being by myself, and so this thing should be a breeze. I'll probably, in fact, be ahead of a lot of people that are here, but I can be kind to them while they're figuring it out. And on about day 3, I don't think she had any idea what she was getting into, what her mind was actually going to be like. And she woke up one morning and she had 2 premonitions. The first one was that there was going to be Mexican food for lunch. And the second one was that her father had died and that no one was going to tell her. Now, fairly extreme. And they had asked them to put their cell phones away, of course. So this was why she thought she's not going to know for 10 days. She's not going to know. And the interesting thing is that indeed there was Mexican food for lunch that day. And so she became completely obsessed by the idea that her father had died and that she wasn't going to know and no one would tell her. And she became completely obsessed with doing absolutely everything right. And so she would sit really tight and not look at anyone and only use the interview time, which was 5 minutes, to ask technical questions. And she refused to bend in any way toward her own heart, to just see, can I just tell someone that I'm afraid? Can I just say I'm having a hard time? Can I just say to myself that I'm having a hard time? And her justification to herself in this was that she really wanted to be a Buddha, and if she were a Buddha, none of this would be getting to her. And by the time the retreat ended, she felt completely like she that she never wanted any part of any of this kind of thing ever again. But what was also interesting was that she had no interest in that anything could have been any different. And so that unwillingness to be open, to let things move, to set our ideas down. In her case, that, she's independent, she's tough, she can handle it. And that anything that might impinge on that reality, even if it was to the point where she just was, almost inconsolable by the end, wasn't allowed in to the experience. And you can notice ways that this might sneak in to your own practice, not that you would have any agendas for yourself or the world or anything else, but you can start to notice how, if someone helps me, it means X. If no one helps me, it means Y. If I'm having a difficult time, it means. If I'm having an easy time, it means. If, any place that you might start to stick to something, to want for an opinion or a stance or it's a way of holding on, I might say. It's a way of not letting things reach you, or of not letting the world move, or your own heart move. And the koan that kept coming up in this domain from the Miscellaneous, there's a really strange one that says, "Why can't the person of great strength lift up her leg?" And the interesting thing is, well, why is it so important to be the person of great strength? What keeps me stuck in being a whatever I am? Clearly enlightened person falls down a well. So much of the Miscellaneous is just blowing apart our ideas of what enlightened or unenlightened or strong or weak or alive or dead, or everything is up for grabs. And I don't know, I remember my grandmother once, fierce Italian woman. I remember sitting at breakfast with her once, and she was supposed to be going with my grandfather for lunch that day, and she hated the people that they were going to lunch with. And so she was spending the entire morning telling me how terrible these people were and how much she disliked them and everything she disliked about them and how she couldn't believe he was friends with them. And I said, well, why don't you just not go to breakfast? Like, why don't you just stay home? And she said, you clearly know nothing about what it means to be a wife of a husband. A wife always goes with her husband, to what kind of a person would I be if I, why can't the person of great strength lift up her leg? Why can't? And he would have been thrilled for her not to go. The people would have been thrilled for her not to go. And say, well, like, what is it that keeps the most obvious thing from being accessible to us? I want to tell you one more story I came across in this domain. It was in the New Yorker recently, and it's about this woman in Spain who lived in a cave for 500 years. Seeing Asa nod, I think he must have read it. And I was it was intriguing. I couldn't help but read it and thinking, maybe this will have something to do with being locked in a stone crypt, but no, we'll get there. So this woman, very sort of extreme creature, as you might imagine anyway, but when she started hitting midlife, she started asking herself, what do I really want to be doing with myself? And she realized, I want to be outside more. I want to be in the mountains. I want to be exploring things. And so she started to outfit her life to do that. And she really wanted to go across the Gobi Desert. But only one person has ever made it all the way across. And it requires not just physical stamina, but it's a huge amount of time that you spend alone. And to give you an idea of the kind of person this woman was, she could prepare herself physically. She could carry twice her body weight at 6,000 feet. But she was wanting to prepare herself mentally and psychologically for that kind of time alone. And she remembered a few years back, she had spent some time in a cave for like a weekend with a friend, spelunking. And she loved it. She felt some kind of deep, overwhelming sense of love, a connection to source. And she thought somehow she had this idea, I'm going to prepare myself by spending this massive amount of time alone in a cave. And sort of interesting to begin with, in the sense that there's a longing to connect with something, and there's a desire to somehow transcend her normal limits. But there are a lot of delusions at play already. The first being, she thought she could do this completely alone. And her hashtag on her Instagram was usually self-sufficiency, which is an incredibly seductive sort of, yes, I can do everything on my own. And she soon realized, in fact, no, you can't do any of this on your own. You have to have rations brought in. You have to have surveillance. You have to have all these things, so that otherwise you could seriously imperil yourself, because you kind of have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And what got her interested in the 500 days was there's a guy who had spent 463 days in this particular cave. And so she thought, well, round it up, we'll go to 500. But the thing was that he had a long phone cord that would go, imagine this for somebody like Bodhidharma too, a long phone cord going into town where people could reach him and the news could reach him and he could feel somehow part of the world. And she decided, no, she's not going to have any of that. She just wants her own, basically her own mind and her own will and her own. She is very sure that whatever this experience presents, she can conquer it. She can, with her mind. And so she agrees out of safety to 2 little cameras, but she refuses. They can have a signal coming in, but she doesn't want, meaning they receive from her, but she refuses any signal coming in. She wants no connection. And they rig out, certain things so she can get food and things like that. And she decides to take a stick, which she calls her Harry Potter stick, and 2 stuffed animals. But she insists that she will not use them as companions, because she doesn't want Wilson, like in the thing. She will absolutely not use them as companions. They're just, but she's bringing them nevertheless. And the person who's writing this skips forward 500 days, and all we learn initially is that what this woman says is, it felt like just a single night. I didn't even have time to miss anyone. It was so amazing. It was so wonderful. I can't wait to go back. All the things. Now, what we learn by watching the footage and listening a little closer and talking to her is that, in fact, she had a horrendous time. That she couldn't remotely, after not very many days, the disconnection from the world became so unbearable, and she kept trying to impose order on what was happening, that if she could just be clear enough about her goals and committed enough to what she wanted to do, that somehow none of the rest of this would need to matter, in a sense. And at one point, she was longing so deeply, she was so desperate for contact, that she started speaking into she broke down one night and started telling a story to the security camera. And then she was so embarrassed that she did that the next morning that she refused to ever do it again. And so she, locked everything back down again. And she got incredible hallucinations. She got some of which she, made them lower down lights to check because she was certain that there were people drumming in the cave or that a bear was, had somehow fallen in. And she lost any ability to negotiate or impose any kind of order on anything. She had to eventually surrender to the cave, which meant she had no idea what she was doing or when or if she was or not. And still, she would not give up her goal. Still, she refused contact. Still, she. And the interesting thing about this is like, well, why? She didn't need it to beat the world record. She didn't need to not have any contact. She didn't need to. She didn't need to refuse the longings of her own heart for contact. But this was all just beholden to an idea. At the center of the whole thing was being the person of great strength. And the only thing that kept her going, that she somehow would allow for herself, were these tiny little GoPro cameras that researchers had given her to document her experience. But they weren't in connection with anything, so somehow she would permit those. And she would flirt with them, and she would primp her hair for them, and there was such a strong desire to live for something, to live in connection to someone, even though she wouldn't allow it. And she'd also get very angry and accusatory at the cameras. But still, again, she wouldn't budge. And finally, when this person on the other side, all sorts of strange effects happened to her that she, I don't think, anticipated because she couldn't will them. Her body suffered because she only was looking this way for a long time, and her memory suffered from not being able to organize reality, and really her mind suffered, her psyche suffered so deeply from imposing this kind of imprisonment. And the interesting thing is that, in the stone crypt koan, it's locked, the door is locked from the outside. How will you get out? And in this case, the door is wide open. But the only thing that's keeping her in there is herself. It's an idea that she should do this. And what's kind of touching and strange about it to me was how what was a completely genuine desire to contact the source, to somehow know a certain kind of stillness or aloneness, or got hijacked and then turned into this monstrous project. And I think what often happens is Sesshin is almost like the opposite of that, which is like we think we have whatever monstrous project we have, and to be a certain kind of person or have a certain kind of relationship, or I don't know the right kind of glasses for someone's face, or make the right decisions, but it's like you start chipping all of that away. And what you eventually find is just there's this longing for something, just longing for contact with something. And it's really just a contact for reality as it is, without all those impositions on it. And no, anything else I want to say about that? I kind of want to hear from you guys. Maybe just that there's so much we don't actually know about what we need at any given moment, or even about how we feel, or about what will meet us. And if we're willing to take the plunge just to be here, or if you meet with a teacher, just to really be there, open to whatever might appear in the cave, might be surprised at what meets you back. I don't know. You guys have any questions this morning, or I don't know, something you'd like to share about what it's like in your cave, what it's like being the great person of great strength, or great anything? You can raise a paw somehow in reactions, or you can just raise a hand. Jan, please.
Well, I don't know if it was that extreme, but sounded a little bit like my self-imposed rules for quite a few of my retreats when I first came to PZI. Trying to sit on a cushion when at home I never did that. Till I saw David sitting in a chair, I thought, okay, that's okay. I can sit in a chair. I had done retreats where you're not supposed to look at people or talk to anyone, completely silent. And as beautiful as they were, I'm here because that's not what we do. And I just want to say there was so much in your talk to thank you. Thank you.
I always remember John Tarrant saying it's easy to teach people how to be perfect. It's very hard to teach how to be yourself. I think that's something in those rules. Like, can I know for myself? No, if I really need to shift my position, am I being cruel in holding my position to myself? Or am I being fidgety if I refuse to hold it? It's like over and over. What's the free thing here? David.
As you were telling us that story about the woman in the cave and how, in fact, the door was wide open, but she couldn't get out, that one of the miscellaneous came along and joined me. How is it that a fully awakened person can design a prison but can't get out? And maybe that's a description of the territory of the self, too, isn't it?
Yes.
Just let you know, I had a friend come and visit.
I like the miscellaneous. They like to, like when John read them all the other night, they like to stick together, play together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Wonderful, Tess. One of the things you said that just really struck me, aside from all the other things you said that struck me, and this is my memory of it, what keeps the most obvious things from being accessible to us? And I had a really difficult time yesterday sort of entering into the retreat. I was gone most of January, traveling, and there's this sense of just being with the wind when I was traveling. I didn't really think I constructed much of myself for lots of different reasons, but I didn't sit much. And so all of a sudden, all my worst habits, which I have many of sitting, came back. And everything just felt unobtainable to me. I certainly wasn't a strong person. I still couldn't lift my leg. And the line, what keeps the most obvious things from being accessible to us, made me realize that I had completely constructed a self again about how I do this, how I do that, and everything was impossible. Everything to do with meditation or hero koan. And so this morning, I actually kind of almost reverted informally to sort of the stricter. I sat and I just sat and I just sat with the koan, and the koan I was sitting with was like, where do you go? Well, where do we go when we die? And all of a sudden, there's a part of the self. I mean, part of the self dissolves, and it's almost like this solidity of the self. It's almost like there's this gradation of grays to black to transparency, that this solid black Eleanor that was here yesterday gradually became less, the gradations changed. And it's almost like that was the answer to myself, or what keeps the most obvious thing from being accessible to us is being a solid self. So thank you, Tess.
Thank you, Eleanor. And yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about the structure of a retreat. Like there is something about holding to it that allows something to be possible, and then you can tell if that gets too ripped, too tight, it starts to become something else, or in service of something else. Go ahead, Asa.
Hey, yeah, thanks for the talk. I was really moved reading that article by also, and something that really struck me was that how even her plan to be completely alone and to beat this record, even if nobody else was involved, it's already full of all this contact, because it had so much to do with how people would recognize her afterwards and how she would relate to this community of people that have broken these records and all these things. So there was something really touching there about how we're always already in contact. And there's just like a little sort of turning towards that happens. And I had an experience like this recently where I was having like a sort of emotional issue with someone I was working with. And I spoke with a bunch of work colleagues about it. And I usually don't, I usually never speak with the people who I employ about my struggles. Like I just don't do that. And I don't know why. I'm not really sure why. And I had never really questioned this. And I talked to a bunch of people about the particular thing that was going on, and everybody was awesome. And also nobody was surprised. Everybody kind of already knew or already had felt this in some way. And it was a really touching experience just to kind of be in what was already happening, and I was somehow pretending wasn't happening. And there was also a relief in that, and also I think other people were quite touched, and they liked that I was just sort of acknowledging and naming and being in what was actually happening. So that felt sort of like, I don't know, there's some cave-like move there, or coming out of the cave or something. So thanks for the talk.
That's great. Both those things are great. The first thing, how you shared that strikes me as, I think part of the desire to get away and for the self-sufficiency and is because she was actually at the mercy of so much all the time. But then trying to get away from it is, of course, the thing that puts you even more at the mercy of, I have to uphold it to not, and I love what you say that, people are not surprised by what's in the field already most of the time. And there might be, perfectly good reasons sometimes to not have that, not share whatever, but other times it's already here, and so might as well. Like in her case, she already does desire contact, so why not, turn toward it a little bit. Thanks. Scott.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Your talk feels like a gentle invitation, as it usually does for me. Sort of like not a compelling, but it's like, oh, this is so delectable. And what arose for me was with it being, I have to do this and I have to struggle to be something. Was when I was toward the end of a 2-year major depression in which I was basically completely disabled. I just was in bed all day, every day. And a Zen Jungian therapist said to me, "You're trying so hard to get out of your depression. Give it up. This is what is now." So as, it was sort of popping up now, I had a picture in my head of when you're at a store or something and the door opens the other way. So you've got to pull it in, but you're trying to push, or vice versa. Sort of like something about the cave imagery. And I don't know what about it, but in fact, when I gave up the fight, and I was just present, really, the door opened the other way, and I was out overnight. No apparent reason. Lastly, since John quotes Czesław Miłosz at times, a line from his poem, The Gift, came to me in relation to this, because I went outside, took a walk, first time without any pain or anxiety in 2 years, and I saw the blue sky and I felt the breeze, and I thought, oh my gosh, look what I missed. Look what I missed. And the line that came to me from Milosh was, to think that I was once the same man did not embarrass me. So that was like the icing on the walking out of the door that was on the other way. Thank you.
Thank you. You make me think of this Zen story about, someone holding the door. One's pounding to get in and one's holding the door, and they were friends all along. Once the door opens, trying so hard to keep out whatever actually is the gift. Yeah. Thank you. Judith.
Yeah. Thank you, Tess. That was okay. I'm listening to the stories, and there's a move in them. There's amusing at first a little bit about the glasses. Like we can see that, and with a kind of smile on it. But I'm feeling the poignancy as we moved on, as the stories move on, at the way how harsh that self is to the parts that are suffering. And that's what I watch, and I can see this little thing that has opinions, and it's like I want to ask, what would be so bad if I were actually to turn to the part that hurts? What's so alarming to the woman in the cave that she cannot even admit afterwards that she's had the experience she's had?
You have something like that for yourself? I mean, that's a beautiful question.
I just notice it. It's where I find myself sitting and catching a sense of how hard it is for me sometimes to notice that there's to actually not skip over a moment of pain. Like even that self can start to rationalize and do all the rest of it. So it's not a large thing. It's actually part of what's charming is to see it in small ways of like, oh, I could sad. That's sad. But somehow the mind has already skipped over it and so here I'm leaning into the poignancy and the magnitude of the story you tell. But that small move of I'm here and this is happening, but the organizer wants it to be something else and finds it hard to stay with what's messy or sad or poignant. It just and for me that's the question. Like, I keep asking the one that jumps over, what would be so bad to stay here for a moment?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember once someone who used to teach with us at one of our leadership retreats says the sum total of his practice is basically, can he stay for a fraction of a second longer than last time before he reacts or jumps over or moves past, or whatever it is. And that over the years, just that fraction of a second, that maybe he can get 3 seconds now or 5 seconds to just feel and let something different happen. You just might like green eggs and ham. Thank you, everyone. I think that's a good place to stop.